All right, it is 10:01 and we are going to get started since we only have about 30 minutes together. And we have two main sections that we're going to kind of cover. The first is I'm going to talk just a little bit about some of the updates that we just sent out, and I'll highlight a couple of things that might be of interest to you. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about the annual iFarms report and sharing a couple of pointers to ensure that you have a smooth annual report when it comes time for you to generate it and do all the things that kind of are necessary to submit that to the state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and I'm going to cover just some of the what's new and the most recent updates. And just to clarify, I'm not going to cover everything that we included. There's a number of like smaller bug fixes that if you didn't encounter it, you probably didn't even know that there was a bug somewhere. So these are high level, big things that probably will be useful to you as a group. So let me start by sharing my screen and do this, and we'll share. And you all should be seeing payroll on your screen at the moment. I'm going to do my best to watch the chat, but feel free if you want to unmute yourself, that's fine too. You're not going to uh, upset me if that's the case. But I've got multiple screens, so I might miss chat just if you post something there. But so let's talk about payroll and some of the updates that have happened here. So the biggest thing on the payroll side is really IC updates. And these are less visible and things that you're probably not going to notice right off the bat, but there were a number of code changes when it came to school codes and course codes and things that are just necessary for accurate reporting. And most of these are kind of under the hood types changes that, again, you're probably not going to notice immediately unless you're in need of needing one of those codes. But there's two main things that you need to do to ensure that you have these updates ready to use should you need some of the new codes. Number one, you need to be running the most recent version of payroll. So 9.81 for Postgres is the most recent version. There's a couple of changes that we bake right into the program, and the only way to get them is to download the most recent payroll version and install it on your computer or server or whatever your setup is. The second thing, there's also a couple of, and if you've looked at the updates recently, there's two IC files. They look like Excel files. And those are what contain all of the code changes that are necessary for your reporting. So I know we're probably getting right around the time where it's time to do that first IC report. And if you need some of that updated information, the first key is download the updated program. And also included in that download are the two Excel looking files that have some of the code changes that are necessary. So that's one of the biggest things, is just making sure that we are staying in compliance with all the requirements that get thrown at us and making sure that you have access to them so that you can do the IC reporting correctly. The second thing that I want to talk about on the payroll side, and this is not going to be an immediate thing that you'll take advantage of right now, but we have built a full-on W-2 corrections function. So for any of you that have done W-2s and you've had a problem or an error, you probably know that it can be a little cumbersome to issue a corrected W-2. We've made that a lot easier for this upcoming tax season. And I'm just going to show you where this lives in payroll. So let's pretend it's W-2 season and I've created a W-2 for myself. We now have this W-2 correction form. And if you pull this up, it's going to give you this window where it'll list all of your employees. And it's pretty simple in the sense of it's going to show you what did you report on the originally printed W-2, and then you can correct any field that you need to correct for an employee. So it could be their social, their name, even things down to their wages. And what you do is you create the corrected W-2, you save it here, and then you print the corrected forms just like you always do. But we're really hoping that this makes it much easier to come in, issue a correction, print out a corrected W-2, and then you don't have to finagle so much with other parts of the system. And then this saves the corrected W-2 for future reference. So we're really excited about that for the upcoming tax season. hopefully you don't have too many corrections that you need to issue, but this should make that process a little bit easier for everyone in that you just pull up an employee, load their reported W-2, make a bunch of changes if you need to, and then print out a new form for that person. So we're really excited about that. This actually exists on the budget side as well for 1099s. It's identical in terms of the way it's laid out. You open up the 1099 correction report. It'll list all of your vendors that had a 1099 issued to them. It'll show their previously reported 1099 amounts, and then it'll give you the ability to correct it on the other side of the screen here, save it, print out a corrected 1099 to send off to a vendor. So no more finagling on the vendor screen, no more trying to do calculations and make changes, to entries or anything like that. You can just issue a corrected 1099. And again, hopefully that makes your life a little bit easier when it comes time for tax season and getting documents to people that need them, and then fixing things should errors pop up. So those are two big things that we're really excited about, and hopefully they make your lives easier. And I would be really curious that once we get to tax season, if any of you end up using these, I would love to hear if it's helpful, if there's ways that we can make corrections easier, and uh, you know, because the goal is to make your life easier, so you don't have to spend a lot of time poking around the program trying to figure out how do I get my social security number reported correctly on a W-2. So those are some of the bigger updates that we haven't really talked about them. They've actually been in the program for about 2 or 3 months now, but I wanted to point them out now that we're getting a little closer to tax seasons, and you'll probably want to poke around those a little bit. Another big change is in Budget Manager, and it's in the bank reconciliation module. And if you've loaded the new budget version, you'll notice that when you go to reconciliation, there's a couple of new columns on the main screen here. And what's the goal of this change is to make it a whole lot easier for you to see two things about your check specifically. Number one, the month year that the check is listed, and number two, the month and year that the check was marked as cleared. And I think this will be really, really helpful as you work through your bank reconciliations. Sometimes I see it all the time where folks accidentally mark a check as cleared, and then you can't figure out why it's not calculating as part of the outstanding checks amount. This should make it much, much easier for everyone to see when was that check marked as cleared, and why isn't it calculating as part of the outstanding check balance. The interesting thing about this is this information has always been in bank reconciliation, but it was kind of hidden underneath a couple of clicks. And most of you probably know this. If you select a check and then you press edit, this information was always visible on this screen, but it was never visible on the main screen. So I've fielded a number of phone calls from people who couldn't figure out why a check wasn't being factored into outstanding, only for us to later realize that it was marked as cleared. So this should really help speed up the process of figuring out when it was marked cleared, and allow you to move a little faster through your bank reconciliation. And as you can see here, if we just mark a check as cleared and I save it, it'll show that this July check was marked as cleared in September. So just a small little change that I think will make it a little easier to see some data that's always been available in the bank reconciliation section. It's just been kind of hidden underneath a extra click or two. So no more do you have to kind of edit the check to see when it was marked as cleared. It's just visible right on the main screen, which I think is a nice change and should help you work a little more quickly through working on your bank recs. The reason for the month year column is every once in a while, if you've added payroll checks from payroll to budget, every once in a while you mess up and you enter the wrong month year for your payroll checks. This is one of those ways that you can quickly identify if you might have done something like that, and that might indicate why you're not seeing a particular check. So again, just a really small update visually that surfaces some information that has has always kind of been there, but been a little bit hidden. So again, as you update, I'd be super curious to hear if this is helpful, having this information on the main screen here. And as you update your software, feel free to send me notes about what might make bank reconciliation a smoother process for you all. Well, probably not a spoiler to any of you, but bank reconciliation is the number one question as it relates to Budget Manager. It's the thing that I get asked about the most. So um, hopefully we can start incrementally making that process a little better and smoother for everyone. So let me know what you think about this change after you've used it for a month or so, and then feel free to also send me other ideas related to bank reconciliation. I'd be super curious to know how we can make the reconciliation process on the software side better or easier for you as a business manager. So those are probably the four biggest things that I wanted to highlight as part of this webinar. So give those a try as you update your software. Let me know what you think once you've poked around a bit. And feel free to keep those suggestions coming. There's several of you that are constantly throwing things my way. Super appreciate that, because we're just compiling a very long list of things that we want to try and implement as quick as we possibly can. But those are some of our high level updates. I do quickly just want to remind everyone that the process to update is pretty straightforward. You go to our server. You have to create an account if you haven't already created one. So sign up if you haven't done so yet, or tell your tech person to sign up. And the main thing is you download the files, the new files, and really all you should be doing is copying and pasting those files from the download folder to wherever your budget folder or your payroll folder or your AB report folder is. That's really all software updates are for us, is copying new files into your existing folders. There's really not much else to it. So if you need help with that, of course, let me know. But it's a pretty straightforward process, hopefully, at this point. But it really should just be copy the files, paste them into your folders on your computer and server. Okay, any questions about any of those updates that I covered? Because really what I want to spend most of our time on today is the annual report and helping everyone walk through that process. Cool. Well, if you have questions about updates, please let me know. I'm going to close out of my budget manager and my payroll manager, and you all should see AB report, our good friend when it comes to annual reporting time. So you don't necessarily need to take notes on this. All of this is available in our knowledge base now. And when we email the recording for this, I'll make sure to include links to all of the knowledge base articles. But there's a number of things that you want to look at and review in order to generate your annual report, ensure it's accurate, and then create the electronic file that you're going to send off to the state. So the very first thing that everyone should be doing is double checking your map of accounts. Accounts can change over the year, and an AB report is not something that you're probably looking at all the time. And as you add or remove accounts, it's important that you redo this process. So the very first thing you want to do is check this map of accounts, and you want to make sure that A, this exists, B, you don't have any warnings, and if you do have warnings, you want to go through this and you want to correct them. This is a clean set of accounts, so there's nothing here that we would need to correct. But the two main warnings that you're going to see here are invalid fund, which means that you're using a number that the state of Idaho doesn't recognize as a valid fund number. So that's the first three digits. Or you're going to see invalid account. And that means that the account number you're using in budget to represent whatever thing is on the screen there, iFarms does not recognize that as a valid account number. That could be for a number of reasons. There are some accounts that iFarms allows you to use, but they don't allow you to use them in your annual report submission. And also you have the ability to specify account numbers just about any way that you want. So the goal is to identify a number that the state isn't going to recognize and alert you to the fact that you need to change something. The main thing is it needs to align with the iFarms account standards. The best way and you probably all know this, but the best way to find that information is to go to the iFarms website. They have a PDF manual that you can download, and it lists all of the valid account numbers, and it will even alert you to account numbers that you're allowed to use, but you can't submit them during your annual report. So the main thing is redo this map of accounts, and it's as simple as click the create button. It's going to ask you if you want to overwrite. That's fine because we need to create a brand new one anyway. You'll say yes. You'll see it worked through all of the accounts, and then you'll save it. And of course, again, make sure you check for errors and warnings that need to be corrected. So that's the first thing. If you don't do this, and if you don't correct your warnings, any fund or account that has a warning in the warnings column, it will not be factored into the annual report. AB report will skip over that particular account. So if it's an expense account, your expenses will likely be off. If it's revenue, your revenue will likely be off for that particular fund. So it's really important that you at least take a minute to scroll through this and check for warnings, because that is one quick way to not have a net zero on the ending balance sheet of the annual report. So that's thing number one, map your account numbers and correct any warnings. Thing number two is to actually print a copy of the annual report. You don't necessarily need to put it on paper. My advice here would be to print it to a PDF file that you can review, but you could spit it out on paper if that makes sense, if that's easier for you to read. So you go to print reports, select the regular annual iFarms report, and if you want to just print it to a PDF, almost all of you should have this Microsoft Print to PDF option available to you. I think it's a default with Windows. And you just tell it to print the annual, and what it'll do is it'll say, hey, where do you want to save this PDF file? Give it a name, press save, and then AB report will, as you can see, work through every fund, do all the math for you, and it'll print a PDF that you can review with your all your data. And it's really important that you do this before you generate the electronic report so that you can check for things that are not balancing correctly, if you potentially need to make adjustments to your underlying budget data or something like that. Or in some cases, I'll demonstrate this in a second, you may have like a rounding error where your fund is off by $1 or $2, and you might need to correct that. But the main thing is take the time to actually print this PDF report and look through it. I know it's massive. The larger the school, the longer this report tends to be, but it's better to do this at the onset than wait until you've created the electronic file and the state tells you there's a problem. A couple of things I'll point out here. If you want to print this to screen, you can only do that if you allow the combined balances page or the fund balances page. And you can do that with this print combined fund balance only option. You'll notice I can now print that to screen. So you can't print the full report to the screen, but if you skip all of the fund papers, you can do the combined balance page and the fund balance page directly to the screen. You can also do the statement of financial condition directly to screen. And I'm going to do that now because I'm going to demonstrate what a fund adjustment might look like. So I will print my fund balances, and it'll again scroll through all of the accounts. And what you want to look for on this particular page is the difference on line 11 should always be 0. That's what the state's expecting. You'll notice here in my Fund 300, I've got a difference of $1. Now, you could spend a bunch of time trying to figure out why that is by scouring through your budget manager data. This is almost certainly just due to some sort of rounding error where we're rounding up or rounding down in a way that causes a difference of $1. My advice here is if it's $5 or less, there's a tool that we have in AB report that we can use to fix this because it's, again, probably just a rounding error. There's probably not a problem with your underlying budget data. If it's more than $5, it's probably worth looking through your budget data just to make sure that you're not missing something in your budget data. So we have our Fund 300. We're off by $1. It's probably not worth the time, energy, and effort to track down why we're rounding a little differently. So what you can do is close out of your print reports, and you can go up to this Fund Adjustments tool. that allows you to look at all of your different funds, and then you have your revenues and expenses. And essentially what we can do on this is we know it's a 300 fund, it's in the 300 range. So I'll scroll down to where my 300 accounts are. And effectively what I can do, I can either increase revenue or decrease revenue, increase expenses or decrease expenses to get that balance to zero. So if you want to increase revenue, you can enter a positive number. If you want to decrease revenue, you could enter a negative number. And then expenses, of course, are the opposite of that. So that is one quick way that, again, $5 or less roughly, use this tool to make your life a little easier. Or, feel free to spend a bunch of time tracking down your budget data. This probably makes a little more sense in the long run. Because at the end of the day, if you were to look at all the full numbers, you're talking, you might have had like a 60-cent amount, and then on the revenue side, it's like a 40-cent amount. So we round up in one situation and down in the other, and it causes a difference of one. So this is a really quick way to solve that issue and move on to the next step, which is getting ready to generate the electronic report. The other thing I'll mention here is if you've done fund adjustments in a previous annual report, make sure you clear them out because these save. If I save this and I come back next year and 2025 and I'm going to generate my annual report, AB report will remember all the adjustments that you might have made in a previous year. So if you're not sure, open this tool, look for fund adjustments. If you just want to clear everything back to zero, you click this clear all adjustments, and then you save it. It puts everything back to zero, and then you can go back and check the actual printed annual report. So again, I just want to really drive home, $5 or less, use this tool. Anything more than that probably warrants a quick skim of your budget data. But that is a really helpful way to move forward with the process of generating your report. Now, this next section is probably the most complicated in terms of what you need to do before you can generate the electronic file. Now, most of you have been using the software for a couple of years, I think, so this is probably already completed for you, and you likely don't need to think too much about this, but it's the whole allocation of money to your various school buildings. And the way that you do this is you start with this ID codes with percents tool. And essentially what you need to do is come up with definitions for how things might be allocated at your school. So this is a very bare bones and simple example, but let's just say I've got 2 elementary schools and I've got 3 secondary schools, and then I want to show how we break down our SPED monies. So effectively what you do here is you type a description. So that's the name of this allocation. So in this case, it's all my elementary schools. You enter the state issued ID number, which again, mine are fictitious, so don't pay too much attention to those. And then you enter the percent of the money that goes to that particular building. So in my case, I've got these 3 elementary schools, and I just split the cost of everything evenly across the 3 schools. Same kind of thing with secondary. We'll pretend it's 2 middle schools and a high school. 2 middle schools get 25% each. The high school gets 50%. And then this SPED definition, it says, okay, 10% goes to elementary school 1, 10% goes to elementary school 2, 20% goes to middle school number 5, and so on and so forth. So hopefully you kind of get the idea of what's going on here. The idea is define how the money is broken up between the buildings based on any criteria that you decide is important. Now, my understanding of this process is this is a federal mandate, not a state mandate. And so I've seen one school that they had one line here, and everything just 100% went to a district level setup that they had. So take a little bit of time to think about how you allocate your expenses, but I probably wouldn't agonize too much over it. That's part one, is you have to set up these definitions on this page here. And again, if you've used the software before, you've probably already done it, so I doubt you need to think too much about it. The second part is you have to go to this account index table tool, and now you have to look at every single account that you have in budget and you have to say, okay, for this account, how is this money allocated for this account? And what you do is you take the number from the ID codes with percents page and you say, okay, I want to break this up. This goes to my elementary school and it's 33, 33, 33, and on down. Again, if you've already done this, this should still exist from previous years and you probably don't need to make any changes to it. But the idea is this is necessary in order to generate the electronic file. So I would, for those of you that are longtime users, I would double check these two tools, make sure that they're filled in with the right information, and then move on with your life. If you're newer and you're not sure and you need help, let me know because it is a little confusing. It took me a while to wrap my brain around how the two different pieces were tied together and what you need to do. But the idea is you look through every account, enter a number for, and again, my numbers won't make too much sense here, but and that tells the IRS, the Fed, Department of Education, for this account, this is how we break up the money for this particular thing. So you'll save that, and then now you can actually generate the electronic report. So I'm going to pause there because the ID codes with percents thing is kind of complicated and confusing, and just want to make sure if there's any questions about that, you have a second to surface those. Cool. And if not, feel free to call or email me when you finally get to this. So, all right. So you've mapped your account numbers, you've reviewed the printed page, you've done your allocation. Oh yeah, good question. How did I get to the percent screen again? It is ID codes with percents is the first portion. So this is what I'm calling these are allocation definitions. It's defining how money is allocated is kind of how I'm trying to frame it for ease. So that's part number one. ID codes with percents. It's up in the top menu here. Yeah, and then yes, primarily for federal. Yeah, this is a federally mandated thing. I don't think the state of Idaho cares about this data at all. It just gets pushed up to the federal level. I've talked to at least one CPA who said that this we have to do it because the Fed mandates it, but at the end of the day, I don't think Idaho actually cares. So because I was trying to understand the purpose and necessity of this. I don't know what happens at the federal level with this amount of data. Frankly, just my opinion is I don't even understand what they could do with it, given that I assume every school in America is probably doing something like this. So the CPA that I spoke with, he basically said, do your best to generally allocate things correctly as much as you can, but probably don't agonize a whole heck of a lot over this. That was the message that I got from the CPA that I spoke with. So yeah, ID codes with percents. And then part two is the account index table, which is here's a list of all your accounts. Take those definitions that you created and apply that definition to every single account. And again, you've probably already got this if you filed an annual report through AB in previous years, but it's worth double checking just to make sure. And I don't actually know if Idaho would even reject your electronic file if this wasn't done. I'm not actually sure about that just yet. So you've done all those things. The last part of this is go to print reports and you'll select annual report electronically. It'll default to the correct dates, but make sure current year is 2024. And then the final thing is it's going to generate the annual report. It'll use the name that's listed here, and it's just going to save it to your AB report folder. Then you can take that file, send it off to the state, and hopefully, because you spent a time doing all the other pieces, you shouldn't have any issues with them accepting your file. So that is the annual report process. Those are a couple of tips for how to work through it from the software side of things. And hopefully that'll make your lives a little easier, a little smoother. And in theory, you should be able to kind of get through this relatively quickly. But I'm going to pause there. And I know we're pretty much getting close to the end of time. I've got a couple of minutes. So if you want to ask questions about annual reports, updates, or other I2M software questions, I'm happy to tackle a couple of those. Okay, going once, going twice. as always, as you get into the thick of working on your annual report or you're working on your updates and you need help, reach out to me, give me a call, send me an email. Happy to help in any way that I can. Our goal is to make sure that you're able to do your jobs and you're able to get through some of these tedious tasks that are mandated of us that aren't always super fun to deal with. So as you get into this, please let me know if you have any questions, if you run into any problems. Always happy to help. So hope everyone has a great rest of your day. We'll be sending the recording out a little later today or early tomorrow morning, depending on how everything pans out. That way you can refer back to this. And like I said, all of this information is in our knowledge base. So I would encourage you all to check that out if you have questions that you don't want to talk to me about. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you all next time.